Hey, what's up everybody, Retro Gaming Guy here. Today in this video we are going to unbox, demo, and review the Powkiddy RK2023 handheld video game console. So let's dive into it and see what it has to offer. Alright, so here we have the Powkiddy RK2023. So we are going to open this up, of course. Inside here, you can see, as it typically is from Powkiddy, very nicely put together and padded, so we don't have to worry about this breaking in transit or any of that stuff. So I'll set the console aside. Let's see what we have down here. Looks like we have our power supply cable, which is a Type-C connection. We also have some decals right here. Set those aside. We have a manual down here, which will walk through the layout of the controls, but let's take a closer look now at the console itself. That's the most important part, obviously, so I'm going to take this out. Very nice right off the bat there. Let me just clear some of this stuff out of the way. First off, really like the feel of this. Feels high quality. Just kind of hitting the buttons here, getting acquainted with it. Standard 4-button configuration, A, B, X, and Y up here. We have our start up here in the top right corner. Select over here in the top left. D-pad here, really nice feel to that D-pad. Scrolls around very nicely. I've said this a million times in past reviews. I'm always kind of circling it just to feel how it is. If they're super tight, I hate that. Don't like them to be super recessed in either. Sometimes they're really flat to the side here, which you can see here. This is raised up quite nicely, glides really well, and those diagonal sort of movements feel really great on here. Analog sticks feel nice. Hard to tell really without, obviously powering this on and diving into a game, but does feel nice. Good click to the button function, which we don't really use a whole hell of a lot, but still great to have, obviously. Up here at the top, we have our L1, L2, R1, and R2 shoulder and trigger buttons. Let me see how they feel up there. No sweet spot, which is good. And by that, I mean, it doesn't matter if you hit down here, right in the center, or over on this end. Functionality is the same on all of that. And then the triggers are much smaller, but nice feel to them. So up here we have a power button, reset button, plus and minus for volume up and down, and it looks like a mini HDMI right here, so we should be able to play this on screen as well, so we'll have to test that out. Down here at the bottom, looks like we either have ventilation or speakers, hard to tell. I would imagine those to be the speakers there. Over here we have our micro SD card slot, which has a card in there. Actually, there's two cards on this one because there's two micro SD card slots. We have this one over here, which is going to be the OS, and it's actually labeled that way. I think this is the first handheld that I've seen so far that actually labels the slot as OS and this one as game. That's been super frustrating for a lot of people because different consoles had a different layout. Sometimes this would be OS. In most cases, with the horizontal layout like this, the left one was OS, right one was game, but sometimes they would be vertical on the sides, and they weren't always the same, so you always had to kind of guess which was which. So let's take a look and see what size we have here that comes stock on here for games. 128 gigabytes. That's actually a pretty good size for a stock card. Usually we see them much smaller, closer to 32 or 64, and then this one's probably going to be pretty small. 16 gigabytes over here for the operating system, which is all you really need for that. Typically when I do my own, I do 32s. That's usually my go-to just because they're cost effective. But here we have USB connection, OTG, have our headphone jack right here in the center too, so if you want to use headphones with this, that's great. Backside, not a whole lot to see back here, pretty much a flat surface. The only thing I would say about the backside is I would love to see some grips on the back. Usually we have like two strips here, or it's indented in some way just to give you just a little something to grab onto. I don't feel any issues or see any issues with this currently, but it is always nice just to have a little something to, give yourself some grip, or if you're going to put this down, something that keeps it from sliding. Not that you're going to be super careless with this, but you never know. I do like the fact that, we have something back there to kind of pad this, but also to give you something to grip onto when playing or when just leaving it like this. Sometimes people put it down, really quickly, and the way it is right now, you can see it does slide very well. So that's the only thing I would say, but let's power this sucker on and see what we've got here. Alright, so just on that opening graphic there, GelOS is what they use here, and you can see right there, GelOS right there. That's pretty cool. I'm going to bring the volume way down just for the sake of this video. GelOS, I'm not sure if that's what they use on here stock. That seems to be what's on this one stock. Not sure if they're on all of them. That's the first handheld that I've seen that uses that, just by default. So let's go up here to our all games list. 10,777 games on here by default. That is pretty sweet. And again, I'm not sure if this is the case for everybody that gets 128 gigabytes on their Powkiddy RK2023, but that's what I've got here right out of the box, brand new. So all games, 10,777. Now let's check out the collections here. So we're seeing this pretty standard, simple theme. We have a favorites collection here. Favorites collection is going to be a customizable collection that you can add all your favorite games to. Tools, so that's going to be settings likely. Let's see. Yeah, just some advanced settings there. So we have, let's see what we have in this collection. Looks like, our theme there is blocking it. 20 games in here. Arcade classics, usually a large collection. 102 games. All right, so not massive there unless they have MAME separate from this. Let's take a look and see what it looks like within. So we have a text list on the left. We actually get some video previews on the right. This is a cool game, AB Cop, Air Bike. Limited information on each title, but certainly pretty decent, layout here. I like the fact that we do get a short little video preview for each of these, not just box art, so we'll back out. Atari 2600, we've got 100 games. 5200, we've got 100 games. 7800, we've got 68 games. Capcom 1, 2, and 3. Let's see if they're complete. They look to be complete. Awesome. This one's going to be smaller, 6. Yep. ColecoVision. How many do we have in here? 157. Doom. This is likely the port. Yeah, 1 game, so that's the port. Dreamcast. 15 games. That's actually pretty good. Let's see what we got for Dreamcast in here. Dead or Alive 2. Legacy of Kain is good. Mortal Kombat Gold is awesome. Power Stone 2, super popular title. Sonic Adventure 2. Doesn't look like we have the original. Soul Calibur. Virtual Tennis 2K2. Virtual Fighter here. So good titles. Kind of random titles, but they're good titles. Easy RPG, in here we've got 4 games. Family Computer, we've got 100 games. Famicom Disk System, 229. Final Burn Neo, 811. Wow, that's massive. Game & Watch, we've got 52 games. Game Boy, probably a decent amount, 613. Game Boy Hacks, very cool to see the hacks in here, 108. Game Boy Advance, usually over 1,000, 1,061, okay. Game Boy Advance Hacks, 7 games. Game Boy Color, 579. Game Boy Color Hacks. So a lot of stuff in here, 200, I'm surprised. Game Gear, we've got 263. Atari Lynx, we've got 83. MAME, okay, so we do have MAME in here, separate from Classic Arcade, 272. Not massive for MAME by any means. Let's see. Just looking to see how clean it is. It's not super clean in terms of like the titles. Notice that it's just the way that the files would have been laid out. We do have video previews for each, which is good, but not super clean and well polished, but still, in all things considered, pretty decent for a stock card. MSX, what do we have in here? 564, pretty massive collection. Sega Naomi, we've got 34 games. Let's see how this looks. Do we have WWF Royal Rumble? That is my favorite game within this collection. Does not look like it. Okay, so still laid out very nicely. Video preview, all that good stuff. Continuing on, Neo Geo. We've got 149 Neo Geo CD. We've got 2 games. Neo Geo Pocket. These aren't super popular, but 2 titles there. Pocket Color, how many do we have here? 42. N64, super popular collection, 236. That's pretty awesome. Let's take a look in here. Same deal, I'm guessing. Video previews, maybe? Guess not. Okay, maybe because they were running out of space. This is only 128 gigabyte card here, so we don't even have box art. Nothing here. Alright, so that's not great. Nintendo DS. Okay, so 3 titles for DS. Nintendo, I would imagine this is Entertainment System, 1288, so they must have, oh, they got hacks separate. Okay. 300 hacks, Open Bore, awesome, love Open, Beats of Rage, 7 games, so that's not a whole lot there. PC Engine 219, PC Engine CD. What do we have? 17. Pico 8. We've got 1 game. PlayStation. How many do we have here? 100 games for PlayStation. Let's take a peek. Do these morph into videos? Nope, just still shots here. Alright, so it looks like they probably started to run out of space because, again, 128 gigabytes. It's pretty good for a stock card, but it is going to get crammed up pretty quickly. PSP has absolutely nothing here, just a text list. So, yeah, they definitely started to run out of space and just kind of kept it moving, I think. Pokemon Mini, 13 games. Minis, this would be PSP, 32 games. Scum VM, 1 game. What do we have for it? Okay. Sega 32X, we've got 18 games. Sega CD, 12 games. Sega Genesis, 956 games. Sega Master System, what do we have? 301 games. Sega Saturn, interested for this one, 23 games. We got to test that out because that can be iffy on a handheld. SG 1000, 60 games. Super Famicom, 100 games. Super Nintendo, 928, massive. Super Nintendo hacks, 223. That's a lot of hacks for Super Nintendo. TIC 80, 12 games. Virtual Boy should be like 23. Oh, okay, 15 games. Supervision, we've got 63 games. Whoops, went a little crazy there. Wonder Swan, what do we have? 2 games. Wonder Swan Color. This is going to be the last collection, 7 games. Alright, so again, in total, and I didn't see like duplicates or just like a ROM dump anywhere, 10,777, so I do believe that to be accurate. But now we've got to test out the performance. We saw what we have for options with games, but none of it really matters if we can't dive into those collections and play. Now, I'm not worried about early collections like NES, Super Nintendo, Classic Arcade, although I probably will jump into something within MAME. Capcom, usually no issues there. I want to jump into Dreamcast, N64, PSP, and Sega Saturn because those are collections that can be definitely hit or miss on a handheld device like this. So we are going to dive into some of those titles. Let's see what we've got.
The soul of Nightmare. You win! Battle 2, fight! Sporty Love. Game, set, and match. Pass.
Alright guys, so the Powkiddy RK2023 handheld video game console. I want to love this console. I love the way that it looks. Visually, I think it's very appealing. 3.5-inch IPS screen, very clear. Audio quality here is great. Now, if the audio doesn't sound great in this video, I did not have my microphone fully inserted into my port on my camera. So the audio isn't as good here as it usually would be in my gameplay portions of videos. So just take that into consideration. I do apologize for that. Didn't realize that until long after I filmed that portion of this. But everything does have very good audio. The range on the volume is very good too. I know that there's some handhelds out there that don't get very loud. This is not one of them. This definitely cranks up pretty good. Minor distortion at the highest level with some games and game collections, but for the most part, very good audio quality on here. And again, it just depends what game you're getting into. There's just some games that you do have just the slightest bit of distortion on the highest level, but for the most part, again, very good there. Controls on here. Love the buttons. Everything functions very well on here. I'm a big fan of what Powkiddy has been putting out in the last few years. Button quality, very good on their handheld consoles. I like the placement of the shoulder and trigger buttons. So L1, L2, R1, R2, very easy to hit. There's no sweet spot. A lot of handhelds have, sweet spots where if you hit anywhere off center on those buttons, they don't perform the same way that they do as if you're lined up right on usually where the lettering is. Here, it doesn't matter if you hit it, on one end, the other end, or dead center. The functionality and performance of that button is exactly the same. So I like that because obviously everybody's hands are different sizes. They're going to be hitting them in different spots. So you want them to function regardless, you want them to function well regardless of where you hit those buttons. Now, the only thing about this in terms of controls and layouts that I'm not crazy about on this handheld is ventilation isn't great on here. So I want to mention that. It's not to the point where I think that's hindering the performance in any way. At least in the several hours I played on it, I didn't experience that. There are shortcomings to the performance here. We will get to that momentarily. But I don't think that it comes from the temperature of the console, which we do see in some cases. So take that into consideration. The other thing is I'm not crazy about the analog sticks. They're decent, but they're not great. So they're not bad by any means, but they're very small scale. I find that just the slightest movement on those makes a big difference in game. So it did take quite a bit of adjusting for me to get the hang of it. We jumped into Mario Kart 64. Took me a little while to kind of feel, where I had to push the analog sticks and all of that. So take that into consideration as well. But there is, decent quality there. It's not the highest quality, but at the end of the day, with, slightly over $100 for a handheld, I don't expect it to be the same quality as like a Steam Deck or something that is going for, 4 or 5 times the price. So again, consider that when purchasing this or deciding whether this is the right console for you. But let's dive into the performance here. There are shortcomings here. So this performs very well with Atari, early arcade, MAME, NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Master System, all that retro stuff. Where you start having some disconnect is Sega Saturn, which I found to be unplayable. It's just super laggy to the point where it's like you're playing the game in slow motion. It's just not enjoyable. I'm not sure why they even included that collection on this card. Yes, the games do boot up, but it's just not a good experience there. Dreamcast, I had more positive experiences with Dreamcast than issues. There were some titles where, yes, we did see lags, delays, audio cutouts, stuff like that. But for the most part, the titles that I jumped into, and I only showed you guys a couple on screen here, the majority of them ran very well for Dreamcast. N64 I found to be 50-50. Some of them work extremely well to the point where it's almost perfect. Some of them are just a absolute disaster where you do not want to play the game like that. And we saw that with Mario Tennis for Nintendo 64. Just not a good experience there, but Mario Kart 64 ran pretty well. So hit or miss there. Typical for, this window of budget, I would say, on handheld consoles. Some games work, some games don't. PSP I found to be hit or miss as well. Mostly miss, but keep in mind, I didn't adjust frame rate. I know that you will better your experience if you do. The point of my review videos, though, is to test everything out as it comes, plug and play, in an effort to be transparent. Nothing drives me crazier than when you see a review video and the person in the video is demoing games and everything's running perfectly. And you get that console home after you purchased it, you jump into the game, and it's not that same experience. And you find out after, well, this person did this settings adjustment or that settings adjustment, or they installed something special into their setup to better the experience. It's misleading and it just drives me crazy. So I like to just show you guys exactly as it is when it comes out, and then I usually do a video later on with usually different micro SD cards, or in the case of PCs, hard drives. And with that, I'll dive into settings, and I'll always say exactly what I've done to get the experience that I'm showing on screen. So just take that into consideration here. I know with PSP, it always says across the top, you're experiencing an issue, adjust your frame rate to better the experience. Didn't do that here, but Ridge Racer had its moments. It also had its bad moments. So I do believe that, and I know for a fact, because I tested this out on my own after, you can better your experience there, adjusting the frame rate, making some minor settings adjustments, but it's still not a phenomenal experience with PSP. So I would not get this console if you are dying to get into PSP collection. That should be something that if you can get into the game that you want on there and it works out, hey, that's a little bonus for you. But don't get this console purely for PSP or N64 or Sega Saturn for that matter. Those are collections that are just going to be hit or miss, and you should just regard those as a bonus if you get into a title that works. So get this console if you are looking for something, that you can dive into those earlier collections, the classic Nintendo console collections, Famicom, Sega, pretty much everything up to Saturn, and then Dreamcast has its good titles as well, but there is some disconnect within Dreamcast. It's just not as significant as N64 and PSP, and Saturn, of course. So that's my take on this. At the end of the day, for around $100 price point here, depending on who you get it from, where you get it from, all that good stuff. I don't think it's a bad console considering the price point. If this was a $200 console, then I would say run away from it as fast as you can. But for $100, weigh out the pros and cons that I've outlined for you here. If you are looking for those collections that it can handle very well, $100 really isn't a bad deal here. But if you were looking for something that can play, from A to Z, all these retro game collections without issues, then you're going to have some shortcomings here, and you have to weigh out whether the price point is worth it for you. So that's for you guys to decide, but hopefully this made it easier for you guys to decide whether this is the right choice for you or not. Let me know in the comment section, though, what you thought of the Powkiddy RK2023 Handheld console. I'll also be doing a video on another build that I found for this that I just got in literally a couple hours ago. It is a larger capacity micro SD card. I got to double check on the capacity now that I say that out loud. I think it's 256, but I'm not positive, so I'm not going to commit to that. But I'm going to be testing that out on here, and I want to see if that actually improves the performance on some games or not. So check back with me. Best way to do that is to hit subscribe. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of this console, what you thought of the video. If you enjoyed it, thumbs up on the video. It's a huge help to me here on YouTube. But that is going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.